But right now we're moving on to our next presentation, and that would be Joseph Iuso. Joseph is CAM certified, is a senior executive with more than 30 years across the IT, AML compliance, banking, financial services, e-commerce, digital currency. So there's a question earlier about digital currency, so maybe for you, and identity industries. He's a co-founder and head of business development at KYC2020, one of our sponsors. Thank you. And he's also the co-founder and head of his, excuse me, I got that, a US-based regulation technology company with a mission to make AML compliance easier. He serves on the Canadian Money Service Business Association board as the executive director, chief compliance officer at Payment Source, and CM at Camelot. I don't even know what that acronym means. At BitBuy Technologies, and he's held positions at the Canadian Money Service Business Association. He's the Canadian Tandem Users Group, Canadian Association of Compact Users, Compact. Boy, that brings me back. And he also serves the advisor to FinTrack working groups in Canada on AML regulation and policies. And with that, I'll hit a little drum roll and kick it over to Joseph.
Thank you, David. I guess before I get started, I got to agree with Vaughn. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, innovation changes over time. And what I'm going to be talking about today has been 3 years in the making, and a lot of work from, we hired a data scientist about 3.5 years ago to help us go to the next level in screening to get to the point where you're doing decisioning. And one of the other things that I have to agree with Vaughn as well, and Dr. McCaffrey, I guess is his name, is that ultimately the data has to be restructured in order for it to become effective. And we found the same thing. We had to restructure the data, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. And thank you, David, for doing the intro. I don't have to talk about myself too much. So let's just dive right in here. I only have 20 minutes. So before I get started, and you've heard I'm on a regulatory boards or regulatory working groups here in Canada. Our head office is in Chicago, and our team is in India. But I just want to make sure everybody understands I'm not a lawyer, so nothing should be interpreted as legal advice. I don't represent FinTrack or any other government agency, so nothing should be interpreted as official government statement. And if you have any questions about a particular situation that involves people's names or confidential information, I'll be on the chat later, so you can come and talk to me through there if you like. Or you can ask
all the required disclaimers.
Yeah, I just need to make sure I do that. Wise people, right? For some reason I lost my screen, but it's okay. I will just continue. So KYC 2020, we've got a total of about 6 years of combined experience in SaaS, e-commerce, ATMs, banking, finance, consulting, service, project management. Both myself and Rajiv, who are the co-founders, are CAM certified. He's got CFA as well, and I've got a few other certifications that I don't really care to list anymore. Our core team is about 35 people. We've developed them since 1998 for various projects in that space that I described earlier. We got to CMM level 3 and decided that there was no point in continuing with that. We've also got ISO 27000 certified, and we've got a few, including myself and Rajiv, that are CAM certified and V-Skills certified. And to date, since we've launched in 2016, we have well over 100 customers, everything from crypto space to payment service providers to banks, money service businesses, lending businesses, mortgages, securities dealers, brokers, insurance, on and on and on. So we have a lot of experience now across a broad spectrum, including integrators as well. Who take our data and integrate it into their search solutions so they can service their customers. And by the way, feel free to ask any questions. I've just got slides that I'm just going to go through. So if there's something that you think is urgent, you want to ask it, I've got the Q&A up, or David can interrupt me. But basically, the increase of financial risk and crime is growing and continues to grow, especially during COVID now, where things are like easy payments are happening quicker and faster, anonymous, P2P, cross-border. New channels are growing by the day. I think I see new fintech companies probably 5, 10 times a week, all offering some new ideas, some new twists, some new way of doing things. Especially in the cryptocurrency space, there's been a big increase in projects that are claiming to be DeFi, but ultimately they're centrally controlled, and they need to make sure that they're regulated. And then there's the ever increasing and growing government regulations, increased sanctions and fines. And I don't think that's going to stop um, the way things are going today. It's just something that we have to live with, and make sure that we decrease those risks. So what are the problems with the existing screening systems? And you'll see the big picture here. The big banks are laughing at all the fintechs because compliance is such a complicated thing. And it is, because most of the systems are built for big banks. They're highly integrated, and they have lots of false positives. And that's by design, so that they can prove to the regulator that they're searching as much data as they can. And sometimes big data isn't the best solution, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So these big banks rely on an army of compliance staff. I remember reading an article 2, 3 weeks ago, maybe, the as well as a Chase or Citibank, and they had over 30,000 people in the compliance area, and they still got fined because there's not a integrated approach from the top down and bottom up. But that's inevitable when you have so many staff and so many clients. You just can't keep up. It's very expensive. A lot of these tools, most of the time, they're not real time ready, and I applaud Vaughn and his team for trying to get there, or if they're already there, because I missed the presentation a little bit. But it creates slow onboarding, and there's, like I said, there's a lot of over screening that's happening and requires lots and lots of labor. So for the small guy, regulatory complexity is death by 1,000 cuts. And that was from an article in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So, ever increasing regulations on screening. International customers are happening all over the place now, so there's a big risk for money laundering, terrorist financing. Risks in every sector are expanding. I see it day to day. It's the traditional stuff happening before COVID. Now with COVID, it's just accelerated. I just can't believe how fast things are happening, and how fast the fraudsters and money launderers and terrorist financing are moving. It's so intense. The ongoing monitoring requirements that are happening with the regulations to make sure that you're keeping up. And there's lots of data sources for screening: sanctions, PEPs, regulatory, criminal, and adverse media. So it's estimated that just in the US alone, um, the regulatory compliance affects over 1.9 trillion annually, which is a pretty big section of the economy. So there's a better way. We need to fundamentally think about shifting our thinking on KYC and KYB screening. We need to think about smart data rather than big data, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. We need to really start thinking about leveraging AI and machine learning for a vast majority of the decisions to allow for real-time onboarding and other activities. But because we're KYC, we just focus on the onboarding stuff. And we really want to help businesses to focus on getting back to business, of being in business. So the need for speed. So we believe that there's 4 pillars of watch list screening. The first one is accurate decisions. And these are decisions that are based in human cognition, based in the way humans look at those decisions and come up with the determination of whether it is or isn't that person or entity that you're looking at. We believe that those responses should be rapid, and meaning quick real-time decisions, so that you can get on to the business of onboarding. A lot of these new fintechs are doing one-off transactions or a couple transactions here and there, and they need to be able to quickly screen and come up with a result of pass or fail. The other thing we also want to make sure when we're doing this is it's still affordable. So we want to leverage as much of the technology, machine learning algorithms, and the like, to make sure that we're not creating a system that is going to be overly costly and it only really services the high enterprise. It needs to service everybody from the small and medium all the way up. And then the last one is audible records or audible results. Those audible results need to be able to show the regulator that, hey, we did our best to screen all these hundreds of lists or thousands of lists, and we did fuzzy logic search, we did all these different logic search, and here's the result that the machine learning came back with. And then we take those results as well and look at it from a perspective of how can we train the learning engine better and better, and it hasn't stopped since we started 3 years ago. So there's always room for improvement, there's always room for changes, and that's the crux of AI and machine learning. So when I talked about smart data versus big data, what I'm really talking about is being very focused on the lists that you're searching for and making sure that they're relevant. I run a couple compliance programs with other software or other vendors, and I notice a lot of the results come back with false positives on the scale of caution, which ends up with sometimes 20, 30 hits, and none of them are relevant. And what we discovered when we started looking at the data and restructuring it and trying to figure out what's a better way to give the AI abilities to learn and expand was to start creating attributions. So things like assigning the FATF risk category, tagging cross-list relationships, because a lot of the lists, you'll have the same person, the OFAC, the SDN, the UN list, the EU list, the UK list, and really don't need all those entries. You just need to know, hey, you got a hit on this person and it's these lists, not the other way around where you got a hit and here's all the lists that you hit on. So we started attributing the data, creating likely aliases and name variants, because that was another thing we found. And that all attributed to that deduplication, or what we call personas, for both persons and entities. And that ultimately ended up being what we call the persona database under our DecisionIQ data as a service. And so what we're trying to do here is, rather than trying to take everything under the sun and then just giving the hits, we focused on the list that made sense for regulated entities, including my own, and made sure that the hits were relevant and that we weren't wasting a lot of time with the hits or the failed results, because we wanted to really focus on, hey, yeah, we found somebody and here's the list that we found them on. So that's what the whole smart data is about. So we introduced a decision workflow that was automated, which took our traditional smart scan results, which I didn't really explain, but it's basically a traditional searching system. And then we started running different algorithms. Now, this is a little bit out of date because we started off with probabilistic and deterministic algorithms based on name, date of birth, and ID. We've since expanded and added all kinds of other algorithms that use those attributions. And then once those the machine learning has done what it's done, we prepare what's called a proof of work file and a proof of decision file, which is not shown here, but it comes back with a pass, fail, or verify result. Pass meaning we did a search, we ran fuzzy, we ran all the attributions, we couldn't find anything. Fail means we are pretty sure that this is the person, here's all the attributions, here's all the lists that work, and we believe this decision has failed. And that really helps, especially our real-time clients, in making determinations on whether they should continue the transaction or not. And then the verified results are when we don't have enough information. We don't know if this is the same person because you're searching for a person in Canada and this person was on a list in the US and it was 3 years ago and there's no date of birth, because a lot of these lists sometimes don't even have date of birth or IDs or anything like that. So all we can do is say, maybe it's this person. So you might want to check. So that's what that's done, is reduced our smart scan searches where people were getting anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7% of hits down to 1 to 2% that they actually had to look at. And the rest were either pass or fail. So that's what we did with DecisionIQ. So how does that all work? Well, we have a simple little interface, and this is, I'm just going to show you our interface version. We also have a batch and API version of this as well, but it's easier to see the visual when you go through an interface. So I'm going to pick on Donald Trump. Everybody knows who he is and how famous he is and all the stuff that he's doing. So basically we pick on Donald Trump, we search, select DecisionIQ, and we come back with a result, which is obvious. It should be failed. He's a PEP. I'm not sure how many people realize that he's also on a list that I'm going to show you in a second, but it comes back with the results, shows you the criteria that we searched, what version of our database you had, what are the reasons for the possible hit, and then the search type that came back. And we, by default, set everything to fuzzy because we want to be able to take those names and look at phonetic differences, look at similarities, look at sometimes there's typos. We find this especially prevalent in lists where they're managed by humans. An example is the CIA list. I don't know how many times we found spelling mistakes in that list that the CIA publishes for all the ministerial positions of the countries around the world. So that's why we wanted to make sure it was fuzzy to take care of those deviations. And in this case, the second record that came back said that Donald Trump was found on a FTC list back in 1984, and he settled the matter. But this is the type of data that comes back and shows you the hit. So there was two results. The first one was a PEP, which I didn't show you, and then the second one was actually the enforcement action by the FTC against Donald Trump back in 1984, which is pretty funny. Once you have those decisions, we have a process called Decision Manager, which allows you then to take those decisions and review them. And what I mean by review, you may have a junior person that's going to go through and review all the hits to see if they make sense. And then at the end of it, you may want to pass that back to a senior person. So we have a whole management system that allows you to review it, note the decision, and then be able to pass that back. So in this case, you'll see here, this is the hit, and then we look at it, and then at the end of the day, you can actually click on it and make some decisions. In this case, somebody decided to type de-risk, which is, I think, just being funny. And once you're finished with it, you can take that original file, the proof of decision file, or the noted file, which has all the information that the person did on the review, and download it. And then also from there, you can add them to what's called an ongoing list monitoring, and you can define those groups. In this case, I defined the PEP group. And then when those lists get updated or there's a new hit, you'll get an alert either through email or API, and you can go into the system and actually manage that alert and determine whether it's actually a new hit or it's something that you want to do something else with. You can set those ongoing monitoring lists by different parameters, including the ongoing monitoring schedule, whether you want it to be real-time, weekly, monthly, quarterly, depending on your frequency and the number of clients. You may want to just do it weekly, or you may want to do it real-time. It all depends on what you want to set. And you can also set which groups of watch lists you want to scan, and all those things there. And I don't have enough time to jump into all that because I think I'm already really jumping into my 20 minutes. So that's it. I know I went really fast. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question. I just can say I'm impressed with the system. The interface looks really great, and it looks like an easy system to use. Anybody else got any questions or comments on this? I know, there you go. There's a way to find out more and to get a way to test this, because this could be a very useful option. And I will clearly take a look at this, because there are some of the clients I work with for whom this could be useful. I think people can stay on and chat if they